Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 62 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. This is a community edition, so we do a community one week, corporate the next, reviewing blogs, even though Seb is making me break my model here, but that's okay. This is the retake. This is the do or whatever. Patrick and Seb did this a week ago or so and had some technical issues, and Seb went back and thought about more content he wanted to cover. So we're happy to do this again and make it even better because, you know, that's what we do. Seb, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. I was on the Disruptive event in Munich last week. I already had the chance to discuss that a little bit with Patrick, and we had a lot of great discussion there. And I used some time there to, let's say, update the content for today's talk that we have together with you guys. But besides that, no, the start of the week was pretty cold here in Germany. So we are definitely going into autumn, and yeah, it's definitely getting tougher at the moment. And traveling is definitely back. So we are not back to the new normal. We are, I would say, back to normal at the moment.
Back to normal. Yeah, good. All right, Seb, I'm going to do this with everybody. You have Patrick and Chris. You have to do. How are you currently accessing Zoom for this podcast recording?
With a smile in my face, or what do you mean?
What's the technology? What are you using? What your endpoint? Is it IGEL? Is it Chrome? Is it Windows? What's your endpoint you're on right now?
Right now, it's a Windows virtual machine where I'm using my my Zoom client, but at the same time, usually it's a UD Pocket.
Okay, so
it depends from the content, but right now it's Windows.
You're definitely not using a Windows virtual machine as the endpoint device. That wouldn't be possible. What are you using? What's the physical thing right in front of you?
Lenovo with a Ubuntu operating system.
Okay, so you're using Lenovo PC or laptop running Linux,
yes.
running, out in the wild, real Linux.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then are you running Zoom locally on that, or are you remoting into something that's running Zoom?
No, I'm using it locally. Some colleagues are using AVD, so we deployed that for a couple of people, but I didn't have the chance to attend that session where we had the access to this resource. So I'm using it locally as a full-blown client.
And look, part of this whole knowledge group here between Patrick and Chris and you and myself is about how do you actually use this stuff? I knew coming into this, I was going to ask you guys this question. So I'm using the technology. I'm using a LG 36-inch all-in-one running IGEL, accessing my persistent, I think it's my persistent one, VDI desktop, and I'm running Zoom in the VDI, and I'm offloading it local. So the experience, I hope, is pretty good for people watching and listening. We have with us Chris Feeney. Chris Feeney's the sales engineer for IGEL here in the, for covering my partnership, XenTegra's partnership with him. Chris, how's it going?
It's going well, guys. Great to be back after a hiatus there for a little bit. But yeah, I'm excited. My home office is full of endpoint options, including a new LG one that I received. A large curved monitor one that I'm going to be setting up and trying out as my main machine. But to your point, Andy, I'm on an IGEL UD7. That's my standard in office setup. I remote.
That real quick. Can we talk about that real
Sure.
quick? You are very confused. So IGEL makes thin client hardware, and IGEL just real quick. IGEL makes thin client hardware, and most importantly, IGEL makes thin client software. And most of what you talk to people about is the power of the software, right?
Yeah, I mean, for IGEL, many people, if they're listening to this for the first time, IGEL is a 20-year-old company. It started off in Germany and was a well-known thin client hardware vendor. But the shift has really focused to the software, and then in the last 2 years, more accelerated to a lot of really well-known vendors out there in the world of hardware, the likes of HP and Lenovo and LG and many others, where we've validated on many different models and stuff. But to your original point, IGEL has still original sort of thin client models that are low-end UD2 or mid-tier UD3, and then the high-end UD7, and then of course the UD Pocket. So my device at home is a UD7. I've got 3 monitors connected to it. I remote to my laptop, which is running Windows, and that's where I'm running the Zoom call. So it's sort of a VDI, but I also have an AVD out of the Netherlands from IGEL, and I'm not using that today, but I can fire it up if I wanted to. And I've done Zoom and Teams calls from that. It works, to my opinion. And you're doing it right now. It works very well. So
yeah, and Chris, you're not sort of doing a VDI. You're doing a VDI. It's just a homegrown version of it. That's all.
it's my own version of our RDP, or something like that. So
and really,
but I am.
And really cool about that, you're just using RDP. I had a podcast yesterday with Nerdio and Microsoft stuff, and we were talking about RDP and where it's at and where it's going and where it's maybe not going. And at the end of the day, if you can use RDP and use the smart and intelligence of the the offloading capabilities of the VDI as well as IGEL, you're winning at that point, whether it's homegrown or not. It's still proven that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I chose a while back to use IGEL every day. And then try devices like this that we talked about before. I mean, it either works or it doesn't, or you figure out how to make it work. But
for the most part, with Teams and Zoom, it works.
Yes, I'd like to say out of the box on our side, it really is sort of, but you have to make sure that endpoint has the horsepower to handle that. And that's really the bringing that up, because there's a lot of devices that you can repurpose that can absolutely be a screaming fast thin client. I could put IGEL on my laptop. It's a Lenovo Core i7, 32 gigs of RAM. It's be very fast thin client. Problem is, it's a terabyte disk. I don't need a terabyte disk with that. So if I was going to do that and make that my main machine, I would like to do some fancy repartitioning or something to be able to access the rest of that disk and have storage and other things on. And I know one of our buddies, Frederick, out in the Swedish area, he has done that. I just haven't gotten up with him on exactly what he did. So, but very, very, a lot of options.
So, Chris, I wanted to bring that up because a lot of people just don't know how easy this can be and how natively it does work. There is nuance, right? If I take my local machine and open 15 browser tabs, I might have a problem. But if I don't have 15 browser tabs open locally, it's not a problem to offload Zoom and Zoom or Teams or both and others. And I had you kind of talk through that a little bit because, believe it, I still meet people from IGEL that can't even explain the difference between IGEL Thin OS, thin operating system, and thin hardware. And so I wanted you to kind of verbalize that for the group. So I kind of set you up to do that.
No problem. That's part of what I do.
Patrick Toner is our subject matter expert on all things endpoint, but specifically IGEL. Patrick, how's it going?
Going pretty good. Seb mentioned we're back in full swing with traveling. So I'm actually gearing up to go tomorrow to Orlando. We're going to the XenTegra event. I think it's the SE Lions. So yeah, definitely enjoying being back to normal.
Yeah, that's good. And I know you and I talk a lot, and you're really leading the charge on understanding these endpoint stories, plural, many stories. But by far, if we want a simplified, managed, secure environment, IGEL's number one for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you guys are talking about endpoints. I just got at my door yesterday. I'm like a kid on Christmas. Lenovo sent me their M75Q model thin client, which is a great little device if you guys haven't checked it out. AMD Ryzen based, got a lot of horsepower for Teams optimization, and you can do all the different offloadings for Citrix or VMware. They have these cool matching monitors where the thin client will actually slip right into the monitor and kind of form an all-in-one. So I'm going to be unpacking that today and doing some testing on it.
Yeah, I love the idea of that convertible type of small PC that can become a thin client PC that could become a small all-in-one, or an all-in-one also could be a thin all-in-one all at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really cool device. I know a lot of our customers have been using them and having a lot of success with them. So they sent one over to, do some testing, bring it into the lab a little bit, and just geek out on it. So looking forward to that.
And hopefully all these Lenovo folks that are listening to this podcast say, man, these guys get it. They can talk the story really well, and they use the technologies too. Chris mentioned too many options. I've got a very low end piece of hardware laptop that's got Chrome OS, Google Chrome OS installed. It's also got a UD Pocket, which I normally boot to. So it does two things. I've got an all-in-one connecting to my VDI, I've got another old school Chromebook converted thing over here, and I've got a Microsoft Surface over there, and I got a whole shelf full of other things. Sometimes my challenge is just having, too many options to figure out, what am I going to play with today?
Yeah, that's the case. I as you're speaking, I have an old school laptop that was running Windows 10. It's now got IGEL on. It's a Lenovo. It's totally fine. Not the fastest thing, but if you just need a browser or whatever, like that's all you need, that's totally fine. Then I've got this screaming nice Lenovo bad boy with a UD Pocket. This thing's awesome. I love it. And then I've got probably one for communities, computers for community, Andy. This is an old puppy, Dell. It's pretty thick, pretty heavy. Still works.
And you give somebody
Anyway.
in Nigeria that has nothing that, and they can get on the internet. Now they
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's like I say, you put IGEL on. I've had Linux on there, and it's a Core i3 with 6 gigs of RAM. That's about the equivalent of my UD7, essentially.
Yeah.
So.
And yesterday I was, doing some local stuff, and then I realized after I opened about 10 browser tabs, it started getting slow with this lower end piece of hardware in terms of processor. So like, man, why don't I just jump into my VDI, solve my problems, and boom, there it went. Everything was good. All right, Seb, the topic for today is we're going to go over some of the CLI options within the IGEL OS. You want to kind of kick us off into why you chose this topic?
Sure. So coming back to the title, we are covering the content of a PDF that I created, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago, based on, so I have to send some kudos also to the original creator of the document, to Michael Hotting, which was a former employee of IGEL, which was working for the pre-sales in Germany, but left IGEL, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that. And a couple of years ago, I thought, hey, there was a document which was listing most of the IGEL and some part of the Linux command that you could use on our IGEL operating system on IGEL OS 5 and 4. I said, okay, why not grabbing that document, making it maybe a little bit prettier and adding some value and adding even more command that we are seeing in the IGEL community as something helpful or used quite often, where people are not knowing that the command is somewhere in the operating system. Being clear, usually you don't have to go to the command line. You don't have to go into Linux command if you use IGEL OS. But if you want to customize, if you want to change, if you want to check, or if you want to manipulate things on the IGEL level, that's the kind of command that you will definitely look at.
Or if you just want to impress your friends.
Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah.
Or if you just want to impress your friends or your kids, maybe.
Yeah, also. I mean, it's definitely something, the first part of the document is not covering, I'm going a little step backward. I was trying to separate which is in a standard way available in Linux and what we integrated at IGEL in the operating system. Since we are creating a lot of overhead in a positive way in the operating system by using our own binaries, our own integrations, our own functions, you will not find any kind of documentation in the KB. You will not find any kind of documentation on the internet. And that's where I said, hey, let's create one page, one A4 page, covering most of the topic that we are seeing on a daily basis, and which might help people in the outside world to get the IGEL operating system getting even safer, even prettier, or maybe even faster. And the other approach is obviously doing the debugging stuff, which is sometimes quite difficult if you want to look at a specific behavior or a specific error that you're looking at the operating system level. And that's where the document was creating for. So of all the nerds out there, to all the people who want to become a nerd on the IGEL world, that's the document I would say you should look at. So I will, together with Patrick, we had the discussion last time already. We'll just guide you through that document, giving you some highlights and speaking about some feature that I described there. So for the listeners who are just listening to the audio, we have this PDF document and we have the comment and then a short explanation on the right side how to use it. And as soon as you go to the command, and one of the first command that you will have to deal with is CD. Honestly, You will already have typed that command on Windows because it's exactly the same as changing directory. So change folder, change directory. So it would help you to change from a folder to a mount point to something else. But then you have a couple of other commands like more or cat, which will enable you to show the content of a file. Let's imagine the use case. You have a log file and you want to see it. You don't have a proper spoken visual editor to do that. You're using a command which is called more or cat like a dog, and then the document that you want like to show on the screen, and that's what these commands are doing. So basically for watching the content of a document. And then we have something which is the equivalent to dir, so dir on Windows, which is called ls for listing the content of something, usually a folder or a mount point, which will list all the content of files when it was created. If you add some a command which is ls-l, and all the properties of the file, like who is having which right to read, write, or to execute that file. Then one last, or let's say 2 or 3 comments that I would like to highlight in that section. Comp gen -c. It sounds quite complicated, but it isn't. Let's imagine that you have the Agile operating system in your hand and you never had the chance to watch at our folder structure and how to deal with specific command. And you just want to know, show me please all the command that I would be able to issue directly from the command line. Comp gen -c is showing exactly that one. It just lists all the command available that you can directly execute. And that's extremely helpful even for me, because sometimes you're integrating new binaries, we're integrating new features, and it's always good to check if something changed there, because we add sometimes binary that no one is knowing that they are there, like the Redshift feature, which is adding a blue filter on IGEL, something which is not used quite often, but you might know that from your car or from your cell phone or from your Windows device at a specific time of the day. The device is changing a little bit the color mode from a blue one to a more red one, which is more easier to handle for the eyes. All that stuff, comp gen -c, and it will do that kind of commands.
Hey, Seb, are these, is this a shell? Are we using one of the native Linux shells, or is this an additional interpreter that IGEL brings to the mix?
No, it's definitely a standard shell with some limitation, obviously, because we're not covering all the features that a standard Linux distribution would do, but you will access a standard bash and shell, and dash shells are available for different use cases. For the listeners, from my opinion, we are mostly using the shell, so really binary shell, to access most of the features if you're using custom commands and all that stuff, and not the bin bash. So it can definitely help you to know that, to make your shell scripts working with shell better than with bash.
And so you just hit on another key term, right? There's command line and shell execution, and then there's the ability to take all this stuff, and this is where it really gets interesting, and you can script it into, you know, a serial list of commands, and even you can then turn around and automate that script, and that's where the real power comes in, right?
Yeah, you can even use custom command for that, because all the commands that you're looking at the moment on the screen are command that will perform something. But if it should change something at the operating system level, as soon as you reboot the device, most of the changes that you may have done through that command would be gone, because we have a safe operating system which is not keeping changes of our reboot. And that's where, and you're right, just use custom commands, because that command are executed on every, it depends from which kind of command you're using, but on every boot, on every network negotiation, on every reconfiguration, etc., etc. Or, because we had exactly that case in the community a couple of hours ago, you might already have heard from cron, which is a kind of automated, or let's say a timer that you can set to execute specific tasks to a specific time on an operating system level, like scheduled task on Windows. And that's something that you can also use on IGEL. So even without using your UMS, you can set cron jobs locally, which can be extremely helpful if you want to perform something with the local time zone of the device and not from the UMS perspective anymore.
And Seb, are you saying like I call that cron? Cron, is that what you're referring to, or something else?
Yeah, it's cron.
Okay.
CRON. Yeah.
So
even
let me pause here real quick. Chris and Patrick, these general commands, I know these are the ones that at one point, at least in my life, just, they just came out, right? And now I have to actually look some of them up. And I've got the CompGen, the one Seb mentioned that kind of can remind me. Any comments on these general commands?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Chris. I'll defer to you.
No, I was deferring to you, my friend.
Oh,
Go.
perfect. Well, then I will take your deferment. I will. I was just going to say basically, we talked about it, I think a couple of podcasts ago where, just kind of like most of us come from a Windows background, right? Most people in our space, in our industry, are Windows administrators. And then they might look at something like IGEL as the thin client solution. And there are a lot of times there's guys who are super technical. They've been around for a long time and they're kind of intimidated by a lot of these Linux commands and doing things at the shell level. The cool thing and what I love about this document is it kind of lays it all out. Hey, here's everything here's all these different commands in the different categories. Here's the things you can do. So I would just encourage people, hey, get this guide, open up a terminal on the IGEL operating system and start playing around with this. You're not going to break anything because you're going to use this for multiple different things, whether it's troubleshooting, whether it's, you just need to find some system information via the command line, or like Seb and Andy were just talking, a custom script where, you're going to need to kind of automate something. Maybe when the IGEL operating system starts up, you're running through a whole list of commands, you're scripting something out. So there's some really cool things you can do here, but it's really just a great tool to have in your tool belt for sure.
Yeah, I know for me, when I first came to IGEL, and I came across this, I printed it out and I literally carried it with me in my bag. And I would pull it out occasionally. Some that I would often use would be on the Linux general side. And the App Armor one is new. That one, I think we had added that feature into the product some time ago. And I was running into a situation in a federal environment where it turned out we needed to modify the App Armor profile to allow it to execute something regarding, I don't know, it was something related to smart cards, and I think it was Citrix perhaps, but in a browser. Anyway, I had to work with development to make sure I understood what was going on. But and then other things, just the journal one showing you can see what's happening in the syslog as a live. You can also do a GUI version of that, but you can have it running. And then the network stuff, I mean, that's generally, I did a lot of that with Windows type stuff. The probe port command is pretty cool. I like that one because I've used that to test communication to the UMS. I remember I ran into that again, on a federal environment where the UMS server was on a lockdown VLAN, and we had to get the network team to allow ports, the communication ports to occur. And so we had a device that I think wasn't able to register or whatever, trying to figure it out. And I came across this command and said, well, let me see if I can talk to the port. And so that was very helpful to figure out what was the issue. And then we sorted through that. But yeah, this is a great little cheat sheet to have, even if you're, just playing around, the user reboot, shutdown, reset to factory defaults is on there on the middle column there, essentially. So it's nice to have this if you get into a scenario where you need to pull in a rescue shell or boot to a command or whatever. But anyways,
Seb, back to you. Let's. What other sections do you want to, and all of them really, help us understand what you think we should be drawing our attention to?
Sure. So I would just keep the network general section in my eyes again, because the probe port is definitely one of the standard commands that everyone is using as soon as it comes to communication errors. But which is also helpful, especially because we spoke about the custom commands. So script command that you execute to a specific time and the boot process. Let's imagine you have your script in find a network command. What you could do is, if you want to test if your script is working, is to unplug the network cable and replug it. But obviously, we are working mostly remotely, so you don't have the device by hand, and you just have a VNC or SSH connection. So with the command system CTL restart network -manager, you are restarting the whole network stack. So it restarts the connection. And by doing that, you can test your script that you put in custom commands. Just one example, but it's something which is extremely helpful if you want to double check that something is working before deploying the setting to your whole environment. Then something which is also helpful when it comes to testing performance. I mean, we already had the topic a couple of months ago together with you guys in a podcast about how to get metrics from a device regarding network speed, Wi-Fi connection, etc. And one command which is helpful is curl, so curl, which is calling a URL. And it sounds pretty easy, but at the same time, it can do a lot for you. So you can check the download speed. You can check if you can fetch specific content of a website. It's a connection in there. You can even check if the certificate is working as expected to a specific point at least. So in the network section, I would say they are definitely my highlights. There's just one Easter egg. I mean, we have 20 minutes left, so I don't want to spend too much time just on one section. But I will just share the idea. There is IP tables. IP tables is a kind of firewall on software level that we integrated in the operating system. Big disclaimer to everyone who wants to use that. In there, I will not tell how to use it. But if you would like to, let's say, block a specific communication port, or if you would like to disable any kind of internet connectivity without having to deploy a hardware firewall somewhere, well, the IP tables could definitely help you. So that's just a small Easter egg, which is included since a couple of firmware versions. In my opinion, what we have done is I will skip the hardware related ones. I will just maybe push one in the foreground, which is XRender, because it's coming extremely often in the Agile community. And I will explain why. The XRender is a command that you issue as a user. So that's the reason why I'm putting SU. So for super user -C. So execute that command in the name of a user. You can check which kind of monitors, displays are connected to the device. Can check which kind of resolutions, which kind of refresh rate, was negotiated between the display and the graphical processor unit. And if someone is saying, hey, my second display is not working after checking all the standard questions, we usually end in issuing that command because it will tell you everything about your communication between the display and the local endpoint. And you can also use that to set predefined configurations, like you always want to use the internal display as a primary monitor, and left of that, having your standard display port external monitor. Obviously, you can do that via a profile, but sometimes you have complex situations that you want to deploy. That's something that you cannot do quite easily via profile. So that's where the XRender command is definitely helping you. And if no one is yeah.
So real quick, I mean, you
Sure.
can take these commands and you could search for these commands on the community, and likely you're going to find some information with context from other users in the community to help, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the last situation where I created a small script for a customer. Let's imagine that you want to get a view which is showing how many displays are connected to an endpoint. It sounds extremely easy, but it isn't. So making it short, if you have more than 2 displays, you can't create a view based on that. So we created a short script, which is counting the amount of connected displays by using a subset of XRender commands and writing it back into the UMS by using the custom attributes. I mean, it's a little bit complicated to explain that via a podcast, but just saying the XRender command is really covering 99% of what you want to do when connecting a display to your endpoint with IGEL or with Linux in general.
Great.
And then
go next.
Yeah, sure. The MISC commands, because we have a lot of tools included by default in the IGEL, and sometimes you just not know how to use them or that they are there. So I will just cover everyone quite shortly. Florence is an on-screen keyboard that you can use in addition to what we have already on the accessory. So we have already one, but if you want to use an additional or if you want to tweak it, we are using Florence. That's the name of the binary. Then we have people asking, hey, which kind of icons do we have in IGEL? So using the command line, showing a file like a picture file is not possible without tweaking. So we have a GPIC view, which is a picture viewer, include also since, 5 years in the operating system. Started from the folder where you want to go, and then you can just look at every picture, at every icon inside of that folder. Then mousepad for people who are using the IGEL operating system also locally. That means not only in a Citrix session, but also as a local operating system, and sometimes as part of an emergency plan. We have also a local graphical user interface editor, so you can edit basic text files with that or look at them. So mousepad, even if the name is not telling that much, is definitely an editor which is helpful for you. Then we have important files in WFS. I would just keep that one because we already covered that in most of the podcasts we had already before with you guys. So we'll jump to the IGEL related configurations. And there I will cover, let's say, 5 to 6 points, which are extremely important.
This is the one where it gets specific to IGEL's shell/command line, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely to 99% comment that we are implementing by our own dev guys. Mm-hmm. So I will start from the bottom because we have the licensing mechanism inside of our IGEL UMS, which is deploying licenses mostly automatically to your endpoints, workspace edition, subscriptions, and so on. But we have still the situation where sometimes this mechanism is not working. So we have a couple of things to check. But besides checking time and date, which is 99% of the errors, sometimes you want to trigger the license fetching from the endpoint. And then there is a command which is called rm_ping_for_license. So in standard way, just starting the fetching of the license immediately. That's something that you can then issue from the command line and check if the changes that you made are working or not. Then, which is also quite often asked for, is a start -wireless manager. That's the command to start the small cafe wireless, which is our name for the wireless connection manager, where you can choose which SSID you want to connect to, entering your WPA passphrase. If you want to script that, or if you want to integrate that in your own custom applications, that's a command I would recommend to use. Then we have ICG-config. Obviously, you are deploying in a usual way the ICG, so the IGEL Cloud Gateway config, by right-clicking the device and turning the ICG configuration. Only issues that you might face, hey, you can do that with one device, but not with 10,000. And that's where you might want to look at the ICG-config binary, because you can deploy the ICG configuration by using that command to 1 to 10,000 devices at one time. Obviously, test a lot before, and we have also our advanced services who are having some scripts helping you on that. But just saying, if you want to play with that, you can specify your ICG server, your passphrase, and you go for it. Chris already mentioned it, but still important to me, and we had already had a podcast also on that one, is reset_to_defaults. Sometimes you just have your device in front of you, you can't reboot it, and you just want to reset it to factory defaults from the endpoint itself. You could use the boot menu, but you can also do that directly from the live system, going to the terminal, entering that command, and it will delete all the configurations made locally and from the UMS via profiles.
And Seb, to do all of these, right, you got to provide terminal access.
Yeah.
For whoever the end user is. If it's the admin. If it's for the device. In general, we don't let users see this stuff, but you could elevate a user to this, and even give them a password if you needed to let them do this themselves on the fly using UMS to issue the commands.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So we have different ways. I mean, we already covered that also in a former podcast, but providing a terminal is one approach. You can use secure terminal from the UMS. You can use the console switcher, so moving from the graphical user interface to the command line by pressing Ctrl Alt and F12, if not disabled by your admin. And obviously, the good old SSH is still there if activated, so you can connect remotely to the command and execute such command also lively on the system without having to disturb the end user.
Seb, I got a question.
Sure.
All right. So if you do the rescue shell, Control Alt F11 or whatever,
Yeah.
and then you kind of, you think you're okay. How do you get out of the Control Alt F11 shell? What do you type to get back to like an IGEL desktop, for example?
Sure. Control Alt and F1.
There it is, boys and girls. Listen up. Control Alt what?
Control Alt and F1.
There it is. Thank you.
To get into
You're
the shell or
welcome.
to get out of it?
To get out.
Yeah.
F11 gets you in. Which one gets you in?
F11 or 12.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And F10 brings you to the syslog to see what is happening behind the scenes on the operating system level.
Yeah. And you can disable that too. Like from my days early on with IGEL with Improvata, when you're in appliance mode and you got the agent on the login screen, there's like, how do I get to that rescue shell is an option, but you can also disable that so it's not an option. But you can also do like hotkeys now to fire up a command prompt or whatever if need be.
Yeah.
So
just in case someone is looking at it, it's on the user interface, display, access control, if I remember right. And then you have to disable the checkbox, which is called console switching. I would definitely recommend to do so if there are definitely other ways which are handier to access the command line, because the user, which will go by pressing some hotkeys to the command line, would not know how to get back, and you would definitely get a call on the help desk on that. But yeah, that's true. That's the easiest way to get back to the graphical user interface. Then I would share just a small one because the firmware update is a pretty heavy one. I would just take one. We already had the podcast too on how to use a buddy update. So having a device in a branch office, which is updating itself and then holding the update for some other device in the branch office to decrease the amount of network communication to the UMS and also saving some network speed because the devices are not getting the update from the UMS anymore, but from the buddy master. Just sharing that command, which is called IGEL buddy update server scan. Sometimes people are struggling with the fact that the slaves are not updating. It can have a lot of different reasons, but one of the main reasons besides misconfigurations are that the slave and the master have to be in the same network segment and should be able to communicate over UDP broadcast. If you want to simulate it to know if it would work from a network perspective, that's a command you can issue and then check that from the network's perspective, at least everything is working. And it would also show you which update, buddy update master, so device where he will get the update from, will be detected, so we also know the IP address. So that's pretty important. Then I would just jump to the management suite commands because that's something which is also used quite often when it comes to changing configurations locally or fetching last configuration. Get _- RM settings issued from the endpoint side will get all the latest configurations from the UMS database to the device. If you want to apply them, you have then at least partially to issue a kill weight positive D, which is also described a little bit somewhere else in the document. And then if you change something locally and you want to write it back to the UMS database, you have the opposite command, which is then write _RM settings, and it will write the last setup change locally to the UMS DB. There are a couple of reasons why to do that, but I will just hurry up a little bit since we have 6 minutes left, but just saying, if the device is getting an IP address after a VPN connection, sometimes the device will show up in the UMS with the old IP address, but not with the VPN one. And that's where the get RM setting and write RM settings can definitely help you to get the last state of the local configuration state. So then the network Ethernet, just putting it a little bit together, or I see I have IP tables there too, so I have to correct that one. So if config showing you the IP address of the device, also the MTU sets if you like. But the other thing which is also helpful is the command which is called nmcli, which depending on the context where you are executing it and the parameters can enable and disable Wi-Fi or 4G connections on demand. Saying why you that? If you already have the automatic LAN to Wi-Fi switch enabled in your IGEL UMS profile, Where sometimes you have to script and you have to create daemons saying that if a specific thing is nearby the device, turn Wi-Fi off or on. Sometimes there's also the 4G stuff, which is jumping in. So disable Wi-Fi if you're connected via 5G. All that stuff can be done by yourself together with our advanced services on the community by using scripts based on the NMCLI. And then we have the last two sections, and then I'm almost done. So one small hint, because it's something which I'm using on a daily basis. If you open the IGEL setup or if you open a profile, you have a lot of configurations, and you have then the hidden part of the iceberg, which is called the registry. Not to be misunderstood by the Windows registry. The registry in IGEL language is showing all the configurations that are available in the operating system. Then if you go to the profiles, you just see the upper part of the iceberg, so everything that you should see. If you want to understand which configuration on the upper part of the iceberg is listed in the registry, Control and F2, and it will show you the path to the registry to every configuration that you are seeing in the graphic user interface. Definitely helpful if you are wanting to see if an additional parameter can be set, but you don't find it in the GUI. Go to the registry, search for that path, and you will be able to change whatever you like. And then important folders, and then I'm always shutting up myself. We have the /user home, which is one of the rare part of the operating system which are not resetted to default on every boot up. It's also holding your user data, so temporary files partially, but mostly the browser profiles, so Chromium and Firefox. And if you want to tweak, or if you want to start sessions, or if you want to look at the configurations made in the Citrix session, in the browser session that you created via profiles, /config/sessions will hold all the possible configurations of your sessions in the command line. So from there, you can look at the configurations made in the startup process.
So Seb, the user home, that one is persistent. Are any of the other ones persistent?
Yes, persistent. I mean, even not completely persistent, but some parts of it, yes, they are persistent. Since the browser profile, like an example, would have be recreated on every boot up. You can do that by using some command line, but usually the browser profile is be kept. So that's let's say one of the rare exceptions where we are saying, hey, if something is going in there with the factory defaults, then it will be gone. So yes, that's one small part which is not persistent, which is persistent over a reboot.
Okay. All right. What other folders are you want to highlight here?
If I have 1 minute left, I would maybe just share one last, which is quite obvious, but for those who are listening, it's /var/log. Which is mostly holding all the logging data from the operating system, but also some parts of the IGEL mechanism. Look at it, check if the log files are showing up there, and if not, journal_ctl-f, which is a command to getting the journal content, is your best friend to get information from the syslog.
Yeah. Okay. Look, this is just stuff you need to be exposed to, know where to find this document and this podcast and the webinar, the recording we put up of this. This is just stuff to kind of get familiarized with and know where it's at when you need to go looking for things, and know that the IGEL community is out there to help. It's probably the most informative podcast we've done, but might have been the least entertaining all at the same time.
Yeah,
I found it highly entertaining. I'm not sure about that. No, I'm just kidding. Very helpful. I mean, this I will say this as a newbie to IGEL, as an employee, this cheat sheet was a lifesaver when I needed to, know how to get in and get under the hood, if you will. If you're not a Linux CLI kind of person, that's fine. Dabble with this, and I think you'll enjoy playing around and seeing what these commands can do. So, thanks, Seb, for updating it, man. It's great work.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
Yeah. Hey, Patrick, anything from you before we let Seb go?
No, this is great. I would recommend everybody downloads this PDF and just has it handy, like as Chris mentioned, and maybe next time for entertainment, we'll come up with like a song to go through each section. I think that maybe that'll get the entertainment value, because it is a dry topic, but I mean, it's when you need this, it's so vital to have this data, right? I mean, I think right when I started IGEL, I don't even know, maybe it just wasn't available or it didn't exist, wasn't readily available. Once I got my hands on this, it was like, oh, this was like, if I was trying to troubleshoot, I needed this guide to just use as a reference. So it's just a super useful tool. So Seb, thanks, man, for.
How about this statement? You're not a real IGEL administrator if this doesn't excite you.
Yeah, that could be true. That could be true.
The fact that somebody put time to put it together, that's exciting. So,
yeah.
Well,
guys,
put it in your tools. I was say put it in your toolkit. But thank you, Andy, and thank you, Patrick and Seb.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Thank you very much, and we'll do it again next week.
Yeah, perfect.
All right.
See you soon.
All
See
right,
you guys.
take care.